It's a good video. Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We're back, and with nothing less than a new Snare of the Month video. And today we're talking about a quite interesting snare drum. You're gonna like this. The Tama 1982 Swingstar steel snare. As I've said, this is quite an interesting snare drum and with quite an interesting story. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine rang me up and he said, "Hey dude, I'm clearing out my storage unit and there's some old drum stuff that I don't need anymore. I think it's all garbage. I'm probably gonna throw it out. Do you wanna come by and see if you like something?" And I was, of course, hell yeah, count me in. I showed up and he gave me, old hardware and sticks, I think, and very cheap entry-level cymbals, and this very rusty, old, entry-level looking Tama vintage kind of 80s snare drum, which turned out to be this Swingstar snare. And I was like, yeah, challenge accepted. Let me see what I can do with it. And I cleaned it up, which is something that I normally not really do. I'm kind of lazy in those terms. That one really needed some cleaning. I cleaned it up and put brand new heads on it, of course. And also the snare wires needed to be exchanged. Yeah, that's what was on there. They are completely, going places, so to speak. So I replaced them, and then I played the snare and I was like, yeah, okay, that's not that bad. But then I put it at the students' kit where my students play. And then I was teaching and the students kept playing the snare and I was like, man, with the right muffling, because it's very ringy, we're gonna talk about this later, with the right muffling, this thing doesn't sound all that bad. Let me go on Google and let me try to find out something about this snare drum. And what I found was pretty exciting, I have to say. Guys, if you like this video, there are a couple of small things you can do. I will be actually considering to subscribe to the channel and maybe also leave a like or a comment, something like that. Really helps me out a lot. If you're interested, you can also visit me on my website, simonspringer.online. I have a small section there called Online School, where there are also some exclusive lessons to check out. You can book online Zoom lessons and everything. Yeah, thanks. Turns out Tama, they introduced their student or entry-level Swingstar line, and all the toms and bass drums were built out of Philippine mahogany. I guess that's the same as Luan. And at the same time, they were using 1mm seamless steel shells for their top-line snare drums, like Imperial Star and Royal Star, and later on the well-known King Beat snare drum. But then in 1981, they decided to also do a steel snare drum in the Swingstar line. And what they did was they took the same shell, the exact same shell that they were using on their, twice as expensive King Beat snare drum. They took the same shell, only changing the hoops, because the Kingstar snare has die-cast hoops, I believe. And this one has triple flanged, cheap hoops. They were using cheap hoops, they were using different lugs and less lugs. This is a 8-lug snare drum that I happen to like very much. So kind of they cheaped out all the other materials on the snare drum. They were surely also using cheap stock heads and so on, and cheap hoops, less lugs, cheaper lugs, and the throw-off, of course. The King Beat snare drum had like a very fine parallel throw-off, and maybe also cheaper wires and everything else. But the shell is the same as in their more expensive line of snare drums at that time. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm definitely not an expert on vintage Tama drums. But they only used this good shell, this high-end shell, from 81 to 87. In 87, they changed back to a cheaper shell that was not made of one piece. So how do you know if you have the old good shell? You have to be able to count to 8. If you see 8 little grooves divided into 2 groups of 4, like here, you have the good shell. Also, red T, Tama logo, is an indication for that good shell. After 87, those cheaper shells only had 6 grooves and apparently also came with a different badge. I really like the 8 lugs. Gives you a more open sound, more overtones. But I have to say, this snare drum is very open. It's very, very ringy. It's one of the ringiest snares I've ever had here in my studio. And that's of course something that went away when they were using, die-cast hoops and more lugs on the more expensive snare drums. They were, naturally reducing the ring. But I mean, you can also muffle this one, and again, you can also fit it out with die-cast hoops if you want. I really appreciate the sound of this snare drum. Let's say I like it. I don't love it because, I mean, obviously, obviously I don't really play this thing. I don't know, maybe I'm gonna sell it. So if you happen to be interested in purchasing this snare drum for a very reasonable price, hit me up. Yeah, let's take this thing for a ride and I see you afterwards. That's it for today. New videos will be coming out soon. Until then, please again make sure to subscribe to the channel. That really helps me out a lot. Check out all the other stuff that's going on here. For example, my now almost 3 years old course on hand technique, completely free, 17 episodes. Go for it. And yeah, take care. Have a nice summer. See you next time.